I don't know about you, but I really like reading. Or maybe more accurately, I like books. I like to buy books, look at books, think about books, but I don't really read that much. Not as much as I should, if I want to keep up with the alarming rate with which I acquire books. If I look at my Goodreads reading challenges from the last couple of years, it doesn't exactly scream book lover. If anything, it shows that I'm way too optimistic. This year, my goal is still to read 50 books, and being naive, I genuinely believed that this was going to be the year of success. Granted, we're still only relatively early in the year, but if I continue in this pace, well, I don't know, I might just forget how to read altogether. Anyway, once I realized that I wasn't going to reach my goal if I continued like this, I thought of the only solution that could still help me: reading for 24 hours straight. Now, depending on the kind of book you're reading, it's normal to read about 40 to 60 pages an hour. I count myself as a slow reader, so I'm going to aim for 40 pages per hour. That means that if I'm not taking any breaks, I can read about 960 pages. If I assume that most of my books are around 200 pages, I would be able to read about 4 to 5 books in 24 hours. Since reading 5 books normally would take me about 2 months, this seemed to be a great way to catch up with my reading. So I picked some books that I wanted to read, and at 8:30 that particular Tuesday morning, I sat down with the first book, The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. This book has almost 300 pages, so I braced myself for some 6 or 7 hours of reading. I don't usually read a book in one sitting. More often, I read it over the course of several days or even weeks. And while that means I get to enjoy the book for longer, reading it in one go allows you to really get sucked into the story. So yeah, it's really nice, but obviously it takes a long time. At 10:30, when I had been reading for 2 hours, I had read 80 pages, so my hypothesis that I would be reading 40 pages an hour was pretty accurate. 2 hours later, at 12:30, I had passed the halfway point of the book, and a couple hours after lunch, at 3 o'clock, I finished it. I thought this was an incredible book and also really great to read in one go, because I found myself just wanting to read on and find out what was going to happen next. The book is based on the true story of an Auschwitz survivor, and it's a truly moving and memorable story, so I would really recommend it. I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. After 6.5 hours of reading, I decided to give my eyes some rest by listening to the next book, The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. While listening to this audiobook, I went outside to take a short walk and get some groceries. When I got back, I started on the next book, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I decided that it was probably a better strategy to save the audiobook for when I would be cooking dinner and for late at night, when I would ultimately be getting tired. At around 6 p.m., I did take a short break to cook and eat dinner and catch up with my husband. After that, I did go right back to reading The Bell Jar. I read this book on my iPad, and I really wonder what you all think. Do you prefer reading physical copies or ebooks? I really like physical copies of books, especially to buy and to have on my shelves, but I think ebooks are a lot more practical for me. Nowadays, you can buy almost any book as an ebook on Apple Books or wherever, and you can just lay your device down on the table and drink your tea without having to hold the book in place with both hands. So for me personally, I like to alternate between physical copies and ebooks. If you want, please let me know in the comments what you prefer. I would love to know. Back to The Bell Jar. I finished this book at around 1 in the morning, meaning that I had completed The Bell Jar in 7 hours. I really liked reading this book, as it is such an interesting and powerful story about a young woman struggling with mental illness. I would really recommend this as well. I rate it 4 out of 5 stars. By this time, I had been reading and listening to books for about 15 hours, so I think it's quite understandable that I was getting pretty tired. So to wake myself up a bit, I did some stretching, after which I continued with the audiobook The House on Mango Street while doodling a bit on the iPad. After about an hour, I put away the audiobook and I felt ready for the next book on the list, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. For some reason, with this book, it took me a lot longer to get through the pages, and I certainly couldn't read 40 pages an hour. I did enjoy the plot, but maybe I was just too tired, or maybe the font was too small, I don't really know. Anyway, at 3:30, I even tried to restore my energy levels with some caffeine. I'm so tired. Time for coffee. And maybe it did help a bit for a short while, but in hindsight, I think I should have maybe gone for something stronger, and by that I mean a coffee that wasn't like 99% oat milk. I'm not sure if it was a good idea, but I did decide to lay down on my yoga mat with a blanket. I put The Great Gatsby aside for the time being and continued with the last hour or so of the audiobook. The House on Mango Street is a really great story about the growing up of Esperanza, a Mexican-American girl living in a poor neighborhood in Chicago. The chapters are all very short, and each describes a snapshot of important moments of her daily life. Everything is written from Esperanza's perspective, so all in all it was very interesting and different from anything I've read before. I rated 4 out of 5 stars. I completed the audiobook at 5 a.m, so I still had about 3.5 hours left for the final book, Matilda by Roald Dahl. I really enjoyed this book, even though I was super tired. Matilda is a fictional story about a girl who is super smart, like she's read pretty much all the kids' books in the library when she's 4, and she's reading Charles Dickens at age 5. However, her parents are complete idiots who ignore her and think that she's very weird. Luckily, she has a wonderful teacher, Miss Honey, who does not ignore her but does everything to support her. I won't spoil the rest of the story, but I would really recommend this book. No surprise here, but I rated a 5 out of 5 stars. Suddenly it was already 8 a.m. and I wasn't too sure whether I would be able to finish this book by 8:30, but I wanted to try anyway. I still had to read about 30 pages, and with the other books, reading 30 pages would take me almost an hour. Luckily, there were a lot of pictures in this book, and the story was so fun that I read it pretty quickly. So, against all odds, I finished the book only 1 minute past 8:30. After spending 24 hours reading as much as I could, I read 4.5 books and 981 pages. Of all the books, I think Matilda was my favorite, but really all of them were great and I would recommend them all. What I would not recommend, however, is doing 24 hours of reading, unless of course you really want to. But it's really exhausting and sleeping is perhaps more important than getting your Goodreads goal. However, I did still really enjoy it, and I'm glad that I got to read this many books in one day. If you want, you can let me know in the comments if you've tried reading for many hours on end, or what your favorite books are. I would love to know. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you soon. But first, I'm gonna take a nap.